18th Invasion of Ada. Long before the black ships of the heretic fleets appeared on the horizon of Ada, the first stages of the plan were put in motion. Zakar, the heretic sea lord who commanded the invasion fleet, had long planned the annexation of the Emerald Isle. A superb general and a strategist, as well as a powerful user of goetic magic. He was the deadliest threat the Irish had ever faced in their strife-laden history. In the years preceding the invasion, the path of the beast started to steer in Ada due to a pact Zakar made with the cult of the moon. The young Irish men and women began to disappear whenever they strayed too far into the woods when the moon was full, only to return home later screaming, their naked bodies carved with the beast's runes. Some giving birth to monstrosities, others escaping to join the hidden covens in the wild. Many others willingly answered the call of the hymn of the beast and went to the wilds of the Emerald Island, turning their backs upon humanity to escape the terrible burden of the Great War. Remote villages were raided by the devolved supplicants of the beast, and crops were burned. Ida found itself isolated from the rest of the faithful nations as more and more of their merchant vessels were intercepted and plundered. All this sapped the strength of the island nation, and the guard of the shores grew lax as the Irish struggled to contain the supplicants of the beast. As follower of the great Duke Focalor, Zakar was supremely suited to this role as a conqueror, for his lord commanded the winds and the waves. Once he felt the Irish were sufficiently weakened, the heretical sea lord gathered his ships and concentrated them into one mighty fleet, making landfall near Athlone town. He achieved almost total surprise, with his expeditionary force bringing the mighty heretic artillery on land unhindered. As the Irish gathered their forces to defend their shores, Zakar unleashed the next stratagem of his master plan. With an enormous blood sacrifice of captives, enough goetic power was unleashed to open the long-dormant hellgate of the Lake Polanifrin, bringing the armies of the court to support their heretic invasion forces. Caught between two forces and harried by the horrors of the Path of the Beast raiding their supply columns, the army of Ide was routed, and the High King Meridak fell in battle. Zakar took the crown of Ireland from his severed head and claimed the island by the right of conquest. With the field army of Ide gone, the coastal cities fell to the invaders. The cathedrals, churches, monasteries, abbeys, and shrines of the saints were razed to the ground or covered into temples of blood. Sacrificial altars were erected where holy shrines once stood, and the Black Knives took the life of those who dared to rise against the new masters of Ide. Heretic priests now taught hell's coercion in the halls where once the joyous hymns of the Holy World echoed. With their cities either burned to the ground, the newly crowned King Neil moved the capital to the inland town of Silchani, where the High Kings of old once held court. The inland city proved easier to defend, as the heretic fleet could not bring its guns to bear. But this only led to more and more of the countryside falling to the invaders. The following decades saw almost all of the country taken by the heretic forces, and a huge number of refugees attempted to escape over the sea to France, Alba, and England. Many were caught by the heretic navy, or sold into slavery of the court of the seven-headed serpent. Yet others gave up on all their hopes and dreams, turning their backs upon humanity, and walking into the wild places to walk the path of the beast, only to return as devolved creatures to prey on those they once called their countrymen. As the war rolled across the Emerald Isle like a storm of death, it was as if a huge snake inexorably swallowed its prey whole, while most of the world simply watched. With their fleet lost to them in the Battle of the Bloodied Cliffs, England was unable to intervene in the war, despite the obvious danger of Ide falling to the infernal powers and giving the heretics an ideal base for launching a full-scale conquest of the island of Britain itself. Only the Crown of France still sent reinforcements to support the Irish. The rest of the faithful coalition offered little more than prayers. However, the Duke of New Antioch sent his own bodyguards to aid the Irish, with a message saying that Ide needed them more than even the home of all our hopes. As a young queen, Brigid rose to the throne in 1890 after her father was killed in the front lines by artillery witch coven bombardment. By this time, it seemed all hope was lost. In most maps drawn in Europa, Ide was shown as part of the heretic domains, forever lost to the shadows of hell. Ignoring her advisors, Brigid married Domhnall, a great general and strategist despite his low-born origin. Together, they made a desperate plan to save the kingdom. As one of her first acts, the queen lifted the ancient ban on Fianna, the hunter warriors of the wild, despite the irritation of her confessor due to the many pagan ways of the Fianna. With the additional troops secured, the royal court called the clans to send what remained of their strength to take on the heretic main forces. The queen then wrote a letter to the Pope, asking for the Bishop of Rome to spare but a single warrior to aid the Irish as a symbolic token of his support. When the Supreme Pontiff granted the wish, Brigid then audaciously requested the services of the paladin Ansai. To the astonishment of the princes of the church, the promise was honored, and the holy warrior was dispatched to aid the beleaguered Irish. Undertaking his sacred quest in utmost secrecy, the paladin stormed the Hellgate alone, taking only his weapons and the banner of Storogram to aid him in the supreme raid. After receiving information that Zakar the Conqueror was aboard his flagship, Hymn of Obscenity, a raid by the flying columns of Fianna was sent to cut off the head of the serpent. How the Fianna were able to learn the heretic passwords and how they managed to fool the Beast Guard of Zakar is unknown. What is known, however, is that against all odds, the Fianna succeeded. The mighty behemoth warship was sunk when its ammunition cache was blown up by a Fianna berserker who carried a barrel of explosives through a hail of bullets. The great heretic conqueror was killed in the explosion that took out several ships. Though a huge blow to Hurl's forces, this alone wouldn't have changed the course of the war. But from the south came the news that Paladin Ansai had succeeded in his mission. The irreplaceable armor of Ansai had been torn and his eyes lost in battle. But the Hellmost collapsed behind him as he emerged from the inferno, bloodied but victorious. Without their leader and cut from their allies of the court of the seven-headed serpent, the heretic forces were thrown into turmoil. This was the moment the Irish had been waiting for. The Queen's consort, Donald, led the Irish forces in a campaign that swept the invaders into the sea in a series of brilliant battles. Their losses were horrendous. More than 3/4 of the Irish forces perished before the heretics were defeated, and only thanks to the Fianna keeping the path of the beast at bay, they managed to secure enough supplies to keep the army on the field. Not one of the Duke's bodyguards survived the battle. And to this day, the Irish send their expert skirmishers to aid New Antioch in their memory. All in all, the invasion cost the lives of half of the population of Ide due to fighting, famine, and people fleeing the island. It acts as a stark warning to the faithful and how close they all are to utter ruin. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and if that's the case, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. That really helps me and the channel. We also have more Trench Crusade lore videos here on the channel, where we take a look to other factions and other places on the map if you're interested in watching them. Anyways, thanks for staying till the end, and I'll see you all next time.